Welcome back to another episode of Broke Up, Not Broken. I'm your host, Jamie Lima, and founder of Allegiant Divorce Solutions, where we help people prepare for, navigate, and recover financially from divorce. This podcast is your one-stop shop for mastering your life and your finances throughout the entire divorce process. Today's guest is Ed Vargo, co-founder and CEO of Burning River Advisory Group and EnlightenHER, a community dedicated to financial mentorship for women. With more than 20 years of experience in the financial services industry, Ed specializes in helping women navigate major life transitions like divorce, widowhood, college funding, and retirement, all with personalized, empowering financial planning behind that. Ed's passion for this work is deeply personal. After his own mother lost custody of her children following a divorce due to financial instability, Ed made it his life's mission to ensure that no woman has to go through that same experience on their own. He's now the proud father of five financially savvy daughters. Amazing work there, Ed. In an effort to equip women with the tools they need to thrive, he's done such an amazing job with them. Today, we're going to talk about how to take control of your finances after divorce and how to do that without fear. So grab a cup of coffee or your beverage of choice, buckle up, and let's once again get you personally and financially empowered. Ed, it's so great to have you with us today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we've been in the business almost the same amount of time. So we're talking about 40 years between the two of us. I just hit my 20-year mark a couple months ago. It sounds like you're started roughly the same time. What an experience it's been. But I want to go back to a couple things. Number one, first off, man, like 5 girls. That is bananas. You are a saint. We have a blended family of 5 children ourselves, and we have a couple boys sprinkled in there, and that's difficult enough. But 5 girls, man, kudos to you. But so let's talk a little bit about that comment that you made and I made in the lead up to this call, the intro to this call, about the experience you had watching your mother go through some pretty challenging financial times, and it sounds like that's kind of what propelled you into doing the work you do and really having a focus on women and helping them become financially stable.
Yeah, you hit the head on both nails there. It's kind of like the best of times, the worst of times. And with my daughters, there's 5 of them, and I think of that as being the best of times. And preceding that, of course, was my mother's experience. And as you mentioned in the intro, is that my mother had to give up custody of us 4 kids when she went through her divorce, back when I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And that's really where, my passion comes from. It's like looking at that experience and being a part of that experience in of course, a very different way than my mother went through, and trying to make sure that women in particular never have to go through that experience again, like my mom did. And had I been around or had this happened today, and if that was a woman who came to us with that situation, her outcomes would be very, very different than what my mother's was. And so, these are big life issues, and they have long tentacles over time. And so we're just trying to put women in particular, in the best possible position post-divorce as we possibly can.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the work that you do. That's for sure. It just everything you described about your situation growing up. I mean, I was probably 7 or 8 years old when my parents decided to get a divorce. I talk about this all the time on the podcast, so you've probably heard me say this, but it was like left an indelible imprint in my life for sure, as it did with you, and it effectively is what propelled both of us, into doing the work that we do. I remember, like my parents were working multiple jobs, just trying to keep a roof over our heads, and it was a struggle. And so, I guess on your side, and like where do you feel the downfall was? Was it just a matter of because there's no real financial education out there, right? I mean, like, especially 40 years ago, there's really no good financial education. And do you think it stemmed from that, or were there other things that were involved that might have been at play?
Yeah, well, the world was very different 40 years ago than it is today, in a lot of ways. And financial education was not where it's at today, although there are still major barriers or discrepancies, gaps when it comes to financial knowledge today. My mom's situation was really born out of 2 things. One is she was an immigrant from South Korea, had never written a language, couldn't read, couldn't write English, couldn't drive. And so there was a huge language barrier and just cultural barrier that she was facing. And so my father was at a major advantage when it came to those negotiations. I mean, she just didn't know what she didn't know. And she wasn't in a position to be able to get the resources she needed. So that world doesn't exist in that way today, of course, with the internet and all kinds of other abilities to get information. Fortunately, for most folks today, they're much closer to getting the information they need. But there's still big gaps. There's still power. It was a power play in essence. And I'm not saying this in a disparaging way towards my father. Divorce negotiations are what they are. And they often don't go the way you'd want them to go. But there is still a big power imbalance in relationships. And that's really what that was. It was a power imbalance, in that case, born out of a cultural barrier and a language barrier. But today, I mean, there are still major imbalances, whether it's a money imbalance, a power imbalance from just personality types, etc. And the idea is to try and level the playing field with those imbalances. And I'm sure you see this all the time in your practice and in your work in the divorce space, is trying to help those who can't advocate for themselves find a way to do so, whether it's through knowledge, just being able to stand up to the other party, finding the right partners and professionals to partner with. It's really about getting on an even playing field so you can try to get to an equitable outcome versus being steamrolled by the other side.
What do you think are the first financial steps a woman should take, to try to regain some of that control back and to give themselves confidence as they're going through this experience, not only while they're going through the divorce experience, but maybe even on the tail end of it when they're trying to figure out their next steps? What are some of those steps that you've seen work well?
Yeah, step one is always you have to know what you own and what you owe. And there's in many households still today, there is a division of labor when it comes to the personal finances. And that works. And that's very common in relationships, of course. I mean, you both don't do equal chores around the house, so to speak, right? You divide up the labor depending upon either ability, interest, whatever the case may be. And so money in many households that might be broken up, whereas from a stereotypical standpoint, maybe the wife handles the day-to-day purchases, sort of the wallet, buying groceries or paying the bills, that kind of stuff. And then the husband might handle the big picture items like the investments and taxes and otherwise. And that works in a relationship, that works just fine. But when you go through a divorce process, it doesn't work. There's a major imbalance because when you're talking about splitting of assets, property, and the like, if the husband has all the knowledge and information and understanding around those topics, and those are the things that are being split in a divorce, the wife oftentimes is at a disadvantage because she doesn't know where those things are. She's not familiar with them. And so there oftentimes is a big gap right from the start in terms of like the woman understanding where's everything at. Like she might say, I don't even know what we have. And that's not only true of women. I mean, that happens in a lot of cases where people don't really know where their money's at. But in particular, it does seem to be that the men handle the big picture items of finance more so than the women do. So I would start with, again, knowing what you own and what you owe as a starting point. And then you really need to understand what it is that you own. And if you don't, you need to get help. Find the right professionals who can guide you and speak to you in the way that you need to be spoken to so you understand what these items are. And then that's going to start to put you on level ground when it comes to negotiating in the divorce settlement process. Yeah.
One of the things you just mentioned there, it resonated with me with speak the way you're supposed to be spoken to, right? And we see that, and I worked at big name firms, and you and I have been both doing this work for 20 years. So you probably have some of the same experiences where like there's the old the financial advisor that's been doing this work for 50 years, sitting behind the mahogany desk and like talking down to you. Like I had that vision in my head when you mentioned those words, like. And in some cases, I think that's probably what a lot of women feel like is going to happen if they reach out and get the help. Thankfully, dudes like us exist, and a lot of women that do this work as well that don't take that approach. I wonder if in some ways that's what kind of hinders people in general just reaching out to get help, because they think that someone like us is going to come and talk down to them and tell them poke holes in everything that they're doing and tell them like they should be doing this and they shouldn't be doing that and all the other stuff. And that's not really it, right? It's all about coaching and really being there to support people through this experience?
Sure. Well, it's no secret that the financial services industry isn't female friendly. I'm not saying that it's misogynistic. I don't think that's true at all. I just think that the typical financial advisor is used to talking and working with men. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how the industry grew up. I mean, we both went through coaching and training programs, probably led by men. The industry has been dominated by men historically because that's who had the money. And of course, we live in a different world today, but those pathways that have been built, they remain. And so there is a challenge in our industry. Again, I'm sure you see this all the time, in that we're trained and taught to work with men. And so when we try to take that training, which works very well, by the way, in reaching men, and we try to massage it or just alter it a bit to make it fit for how women think, it doesn't really work. It just misses the mark. And because women and men engage with money very differently. And so it is a barrier when you're a woman trying to get information, you're trying to do the right thing, you do the Google search, you read all the different things about what steps should you take to hire a financial professional. In the divorce arena, you might say, okay, let's find a CDFA, that's Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, right? There aren't many of us out there, but go find them. And then you do that. And if that person isn't used to working with women, and particularly women going through a crisis like divorce, the experience usually falls flat. And it's intimidating to begin with. Again, women have a tendency to not like to engage with money, at least less so than men traditionally do. And then when you actually do that and you reach out and you do all the right things and it falls flat, then what do? You kind of throw up your hands, or you talk to your girlfriends and they have the same experience. It can be very frustrating, and it just doesn't lead to getting the advice and the information you need, which is a real problem. And it's part of the reason that I'm probably why you have Allegiant Divorce as a separate entity, right? To be able to talk that and to get that information out into the world. I don't want to put words in your mouth or anything, but we started EnlightenHER for that same reason, is because we needed a broader way to reach more women where they are today versus the traditional financial model.
Yeah, it's amazing. I want to come back to EnlightenHER in just a second, because I have some questions on that program and what you've done, the work that you're doing there. But before I forget, because I'm old, I want to ask this question about because we're still on the women here and the experiences that they have, and a lot of it's emotional too, right? I mean, let's just call it what it is, right? Because women tend to be more emotional than men when it comes to some of these things. So, you said before that money is never just about numbers. There are some emotions, and there's strong held beliefs that impact our decision making, especially with a lot of the women that you work with. So how do some of like the old stories and all the experiences that we've had, especially from divorce, how have you seen them hold women back in actually taking specific financial action?
Well, there's no doubt that money is emotional regardless. I mean, we sort of think of it, or we'd like to think of it as this inert, neutral item, but people have fear when it comes to money. That's an emotion, right? They have a lack of confidence. They're intimidated by it. And so money in and of itself is emotional. And then you add in the element of a divorce. But even if you're not going through divorce, your history with money matters. And so you've probably heard this talked about as it's sort of the invisible money scripts, or this dialogue, this sort of subconscious dialogue that you have with yourself that prevents you from moving forward with money in a certain way, even though you may not know it. So I was talking to a family member not that long ago, and he's in retirement, and he's done a great job, an amazing job of saving over time, investing, being frugal with his spending. And he's at a place right now where he could spend way more than he's spending, right? He's done the hard work. And so I'm trying to get him to realize that and go spend his money, and I know he doesn't want to be the richest person in the graveyard. That's not what motivates him, but he can't get himself to spend money. There's no reason to be fearful. I mean, by every objective measure, the guy's going to die with a ton of money, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And even if he doubled or tripled his spending every year for the rest of his life, he's still going to die with more than he ever needs. And yet he can't move forward with it. You know, so that's part of the challenge is that understanding where are your biases when it comes to money? What are the things that are holding you back? It has nothing to do with intelligence or even in many cases, education, like traditional financial education, because we can go through the concepts with clients. And yet if they don't move forward, that's a behavioral piece. And so being able to tap in and talk about money in the way that women think about money, again, coming back to how women and men think about money differently, is that men tend to be a bit more tangible. Like it's good enough for a lot of guys to go to them and say, hey, your investments are beating the market by, 20 basis points or by 2% or 3%. Mm-hmm. That resonates with men. There's like, great, I have more money. I'm doing better than the benchmark. Awesome. If I say that to a woman, she's going to be like, yeah, great. So what? That doesn't matter to her. What matters is that she's like, okay, what does that mean for my life? What does that 2% equate in terms of what I can do in my life? Am I going to be able to travel more? Am I going to be able to retire earlier? Can I educate my kids better? Am I going to be able to do things for others in my family? It's different, and so that's one of the challenges is that our industry, when we talk about the same subject, this 2% higher rate of return than the stock market, you have to use very different words and put into a very different context when you're talking to a man and a woman. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't think a lot of our industry really gets that, certainly not in the way that is enabling them to connect with women in the way that women want to be connected with.
One of the things that I see all the time in working with women that are going through divorce, and I'm doing this work for a long time, and I can't remember the last time a gentleman asked me this, but this comes from women a lot. And then one of the questions is, can I keep the house? Right. And mainly what they're asking is like, are we going to be okay? What is my lifestyle going to look like? Any thoughts on that? Sure.
I mean, that's very common. I had a conversation just yesterday with the woman, and she said, I would like my son to have stability. I'd like them to remain in the same neighborhood with the same kids. And I don't say this in this disparaging way, but I've never heard that from the guy.
Yeah.
And I think guys think about the house more of as an asset, and that's an interchangeable asset. If I don't live in this house, I can live in another house. And a woman thinks more broadly about it. She's thinking about not the house as an asset. She's thinking about it as the place where her children live.
Yeah.
And it's very different. And so on paper, that asset might look the same as a 401k plan or money sitting in cash. And to the court system, maybe it looks the same, but you and I both know that they're not the same, certainly not in terms of its value as an asset, but take that aside, they're different because you can't live in your 401k plan, right? So it is very different. And that's why I think getting the right knowledge and the right information in the right context is so important. Because on paper, a lot of these things can look the same, but they are very different in the real world where you live and breathe.
Let's dive into that a little bit, because for the people that are listening that don't really understand that concept, can you give me an example, right? So like we're talking about tax situations and the taxation of different accounts, right? Let's maybe peel back the onion on that a little bit.
Sure. So in a divorce process, a lot of times what you're looking at is trying to find a fair settlement. And let's just say a fair settlement is 50-50. Half of all of the assets, one half goes to the husband, the other half goes to the wife. And then they look at the types of assets that you own. So you have a house, and let's say the house is worth $500,000 free and clear. And then you have a 401k plan that's worth $500,000 free and clear. So on paper, those two assets are equal. They're both worth $500,000 right now. If you sold all the assets and we're going to make it even simpler, no tax implications from this at all. So they're exactly the same. If you sell both, you're both sitting there with $500,000. But in the real world, that's not how it works, right? Because we know, or I shouldn't say we know, but because that 401k plan is invested, and let's say it's invested in the stock market, which has a potential for growth of the long-term average in the stock markets, say 10%. So that asset is going to grow, and it's going to double approximately every 7 years. And the asset in the home, maybe it grows by 4% a year. Okay, and so it's going to grow much more slowly. And so from an asset standpoint today, they're both the same. But if you hold each of those assets for 20 years, the 401k plan is going to be worth way more money than the house. And that's a very simple level of analyses, but it just, if you're looking at the totality of someone's life and planning for their entire life and not just here and now, you would evaluate those two assets very differently. You would not say, oh, it doesn't matter which one you take. You want the house, take the house. It's fine. You have a place to live. You have security. And this is what the guys do. They're like, oh yeah, take the house. You should have the house. They put on their, their altruistic hat and they say, oh, I think you should have the house. Keep the kid there. Have stability. You want the house. Great. And secretly he's like, yeah, I don't want that house. I want the $500,000 401k plan that's going to double and triple much faster than that home will. And so I say that in a negative way, in a disparaging way. So maybe not all guys are like that, but some are. And even if you aren't, you definitely should know, what the value of that house is, not just today, but down the road. And that's one small example of when you're getting into the minutia of divorce and divorce settlement, why not knowing what you don't know can really hurt you.
Absolutely. It's all about financial literacy, right? And then this is stuff that they don't teach you in school, and why we're going to be gainfully employed for the foreseeable future. And as far as literacy goes, you've done an amazing job, sounds like, with your daughters. What are some of the practical tips that listeners that do have kids that want to, enlighten them and give them some financial literacy themselves? And what would you say to them, or some of the early things that you would want them to pass along to their own children?
Sure. Probably what they've heard all along: start young, right? The power of compound interest works for you when you're young. And so if you could show that or demonstrate that to them, run through some numbers with them and just say, look, I'll give you an example of what I did with my girls. Now, you don't have to be a financial advisor to do this. So I went into sec.gov, right? The SEC's website. If you go to sec.gov, there's a compound interest calculator there. Very simple, very easy to use, plug in a couple of numbers. And I took my oldest daughter when she was 16. I said, hey, Maddie, let me walk you through this. And so I went in, I started playing with this calculator, and I said, hey, look, if we put in $250 a year, not a month, a year, starting now until you were 65. And we just running at 8% or whatever, and that's a lower interest rate versus historical numbers. You can play with the numbers yourself. I said, just take a look at what $250 a year looks like if we started this today. And it's like some crazy big number. Right. So what I did is we did this together. She punched in the numbers. It was simple. She could graphically see this chart, and it demonstrated to her. She didn't have to believe me. We went to this government website and she believed that, and it has all this money. And then we started playing. Said, well, what if you started out by putting $100 a month, and maybe you took some of your birthday money and you seeded it with, like, I don't know, maybe at $500 or $200, whatever. Again, you get to plug in these numbers. And they get to actually see the growth of those investments over time. And then I just remember her saying, like, she was like kind of like in awe of this, like stunned. And she's like, well, why wouldn't everybody do this? And I was like, oh yeah, I got this one, right? Just set the hook. Why wouldn't everybody do this, right? And when you look at it from that honest and naive, I won't say naive, but innocent lens, yeah, why wouldn't everybody do this? Well, because they don't really know. I think most people, or many people, certainly a lot more than are doing it today, could carve out $250 a year in some type of an account, and you can pick the appropriate account and get started today. And then when you do that, you just let it run. It just grows and grows and grows, And so that's a simple and easy thing, and a visual thing for children. I've done that with some of our clients' children, and it always works really, really well. And you get them young. You're not lecturing. You're just educating them. I think that's one of the most important things, getting started early. And then as a part of getting started early, I think parents should just model the behavior they want to see in their kids. I think we understand this when it comes to living our life. So if you have certain values you want your children to have, and you want to instill those values, well, you should probably live those values, right? It's a lot easier to say, hey, this is what we do here. Mm-hmm. And consequently, here's what we don't do. When it comes to money, it's the same thing. So I think we should talk about money in the open. If that's something that's of value, I think it is. To me, it is of value. Not that every subject has to be on the table. Talk about money in front of them. Talk about money in a positive way. If you want them to value $1, then Don't give them an allowance, make them earn that allowance. Even if they have to do almost nothing to get the money, they need to equate work with payment, right? You just give them money, then that's not how it works in the real world. Nobody just gets money. So you have to work for it. So just do some menial tasks around the house, get the money, and then let them use their own money to buy stuff that maybe the household shouldn't buy. So we'll go to movies. We like to go to the movies a lot. And I'll buy, so dad's bringing for popcorn and a soda. But, there's all kinds of other candies and concessions there. I'm not buying that. But if they have their own money and they want to use it, okay, use it. Yeah, it teaches them the value of a dollar. So really 3 things. I would compound interest. I'd show them that SEC calculator. I would model good behavior, the behavior you want, start those conversations early, and then give them dollars of their own and tie it to some sort of work so they understand that those two go hand in hand.
It's not rocket science, right? I mean, I think people overthink it, and they get so overwhelmed. And what do I do? And how do I put them on the right track? And I have to do this thing and that thing. And even as financial professionals, it's just very easy. Just keep it super simple, right? You don't need to overcomplicate it. And we did a very, very similar strategy with our kids as well. We had Roth IRAs as soon as they had their first, we let them work for a year and spend the money that they earned for that first year. Then after that first year, they had to contribute to their Roth IRAs, and it's just great lessons for them to learn along the way. So thanks for sharing that, man. Tell me about, I want to come back to this. I promise I didn't forget. EnlightenHER. Tell me about EnlightenHER and where that came from and what you guys are doing there.
Sure. Well, I appreciate you asking. EnlightenHER is a women's first financial education company. Very succinct. And that's really what we're about. We recognize that there's a big gap in terms of the financial literacy of women in general. I mean, there's a big gap in financial literacy for men and women. Let's just be upfront about that. But the gap is larger for women than it is for men. And so when we started I really started looking at my girls and why they interact with money differently than their peer group. Because I can see how their friends interact. They have some family members that are of the same age, extended family, that think about money very differently. And the difference is that they have a financial advisor as a father, my kids do, and the other ones don't. And it's not like I'm sitting down with them, going at a chalkboard and doing all these complicated formulas. I did exactly what I told you a second ago. We've modeled good behavior. I walk them through compound interest stuff, and then I give them their own money, or I make them earn their own money in the household. Mm-hmm. It's just basic knowledge, really. It's just basic financial literacy. And so if we really want to see a change, this is my viewpoint. It's not the only viewpoint, but this is my perspective. My thought is, if we can get the women who are just entering the workforce, this is where the genesis of the idea started. Really, I wanted to be able to talk to the moms of these women, quite frankly, because I don't think the younger generation just getting started, they may be interested, they may not, but the moms care about their kids, they care about their daughters. And so the idea was, well, can we provide some financial literacy? Maybe we can't go direct to the consumer like my girl's age, early 20s. Maybe that's a little early, although my thoughts are changing on that a little bit. Maybe we can start to reach the mothers who can then, they've recognized the mistakes they've made over time. I've heard this a lot, like, oh, I wish I could go back and do it all over again. Well, you sort of have a chance. You can do that for your children. And so if you could become a conduit to financial knowledge and understanding and perspective for your children, then that's going to be able to, maybe that's enough to get people started. Because it's about getting started with this financial knowledge early in life and have that carry forward, because if we could get this next generation to take hold, then they can teach their children and go outward to their peer group. So long story short, EnlightenHER is this women's first financial education company where we're out there. Our mission is just to get as much financial information in the hands of women in the way that women want the information. So it's built from the ground up for how women think about money. What is the purpose of this money? Not about making the most money, tying in with the emotions around money. Again, men have emotions around money and women do. So we're just leaning into the emotions that women tend to have around money in their way. And yeah, the idea is quite simple. It's just to educate and then hopefully have a sea change for not just their generation, but for generations thereafter. if we really want to fix the problem, we can't just fix it, one client at a time. We want to do it on a much broader scale.
Yeah, and then you get that multiplier effect, and then on and on and on, right? So it's a generational thing. I love it, man. I always ask this question when we're getting ready to wrap. So let me ask you the same question I ask everybody else. This is what I call the carte blanche segment of our conversation today. Is there anything that I should have asked that I didn't ask, or anything you want to share with our listeners that would be important for them to know that we haven't covered today?
Well, we talked about a lot of different things and a lot of different levels, whether it's divorce or just kids and women in finance in general. I think I would just harken back to what you said earlier. A lot of the financial advice, or what people think the financial advice or knowledge they should have, is much simpler than they think. I think getting started is much, much easier and a lot less intimidating and much smaller than people think. They think it's good because the world of finance is large. It's wide and it's deep and it's very complicated, but not for everybody and not for most, and not if you're getting started. If you're getting started, it is just very simple. Maybe you just need to save a couple of dollars, right? Because at the end of the day, the fundamentals are you need to save some money, save/invest some money, not run up debt. Those are the kind of the basics. Everybody kind of knows that. And yet they get hung up on, well, what's the best way to pay off debt, or what's the best way to save? Just start by saving some money into a separate bank account somewhere. And then take the next step from there. So I just really think that if we could get out of our own heads and not try and pick the perfect plan, not find the perfect solution, just find a solution, a foot in the door, do something that's positive, save a couple of dollars on a regular basis, pay down a debt, pay extra on this, or don't run up a credit card. If you just start there and then you learn a little bit in that process and then you take the next step. But, you can't just keep pushing this stuff off. I mean, that's the thing. I think a lot of people just push off this decision, whatever that decision is. I'll get to it later. I'm so busy. I don't know anything. And it's that little story we tell ourselves that makes it okay to not engage and have that quote unquote bad behavior. So hopefully that answers your question. I don't know if it does, but
absolutely, man. And it's just all about getting momentum, right? You just take one step forward, you do one small little task, and it turns into a bigger situation. You get that snowball effect, and you get the momentum, and the next thing you know, you're sitting in a great spot. I mean, I've seen people, wipe out credit card debt and buy the home that they've always dreamed about, or put little Johnny, little Susie through college, and all those things simply by taking that first step. So I couldn't agree more, man. Thanks, Ed. Thanks so much for being here with us today, for bringing your deep expertise and, frankly, even deeper empathy that you have for people to our episode. So your story, your family legacy, your mission with EnlightenHER are incredibly powerful reminders that financial empowerment is both a personal and a generational gift. You can connect with Ed through Burning River Advisory Group or join the EnlightenHER community to access mentorship, resources, and planning tools that we're going to make sure are all linked in the show notes. And if you're currently walking through the storm of divorce, Allegiant Divorce Solutions is here to help you move from confusion to clarity. Visit us at allegiantds.com. Don't forget to subscribe to more episodes of Broke Up Not Broken for more conversations just like this that blend financial guidance with emotional strength. Until next time.